Okay, good afternoon, everyone. That's me again, Alex Taylor. So last year I gave a presentation about using OS2 effectively on high-resolution screens. And at the time, doing that kind of involved fiddling with a lot of different settings. And I said then that I was hoping to get them all integrated into one easy-to-manage tool. Well, there's been a lot of progress made since last year. So I decided to do a follow-up this year to show you some of that progress. So for those of you who might not have watched my presentation last year, I'll recap the basic problem, which is a lot of computer screens nowadays offer extremely high resolutions, like 2K, 2.5K, 4K, Retina displays, if you're familiar with the Apple world there, and so on. So generally speaking, OS2 has video drivers which can, for the most part, handle these large resolutions, but that kind of leaves you squinting at tiny text and icons if the screen that it's being displayed on isn't so big. So for example, my laptop here, it's a 16-inch screen, but it's got a resolution of 2560 by 1600. I don't know about you, but my eyesight isn't really the best, especially it's not getting any better with age. So I think some of you can probably relate. And I want to clarify that by high resolution, I don't really mean the video dimensions in pixels so much as I mean the pixel density. So that's determined by both the video dimensions, like 1920 by 1080 or 2560 by 1600 in this case, by both that and the physical size of the screen. So the two of them together will determine what the pixel density is. Now, in display terminology, going back hundreds of years, in fact, an output grid is usually measured in a measurement called dots per inch, or DPI. Now, when we're dealing with computer screens, the dots in this case are actually pixels, so we also use the term pixels per inch in computing. And I generally prefer that term for a number of reasons, which I don't really need to get into. So, getting back to OS2, Presentation Manager, OS2's graphics engine, it was designed back in, 1990-ish. It was designed for a pixel density of either 96 or 120 ppi. And that actually held fairly true through the early aughts. But all else, yeah, as I said before, modern computer screens, especially in the last 5-6 years, they're often much more dense. And sometimes they get up to like more than 200 ppi. For the record, this, and if any of you have taken a close look at my screen while I've been here, you can see how tiny the native display components are on it. This is like 190 ppi. Some Apple Retina displays, I think, are well over 200. So all else being equal, this causes icons, text, and UI elements to appear smaller on the screen, as you would expect. Now, many operating systems, we don't need to name them, nowadays provide so-called scaling options, which are designed to compensate for that. So you can say, like, scale everything on this monitor to 125% or 150% or whatever. On Windows, okay, I will name it. On Windows, for example, if you look at the display settings, there is a setting called change the size of text, apps, and other items under the display options. However, obviously, OS2 does not have an option like that. And it's not entirely easy to engineer that because Presentation Manager really was not designed to do sort of universal scaling of that sort. I think the commercial version of Snap had like a zoom feature where you could like zoom in on a specific area of the screen, but that didn't change the desktop size. You were just kind of artificially blowing things up. If you panned, you had to pan around to view the whole desktop. So anyway, what can we do about this problem? That was kind of the thrust of my presentation last year, but I went into some sort of workarounds, and I'll kind of recap them here. So the simplest workaround for this problem is obviously just lower the screen resolution, or the desktop resolution, I should say. And if you do that, it's not going to help unless you also make sure that the screen is actually scaling the output to the full size of the monitor. I know on ThinkPads you sometimes had an option of like scaling it or not scaling it, so you could actually have a lower resolution display, but it'd be like a postage stamp in the middle of the screen. So you don't want that, because that sort of defeats the purpose. But if you scale to the full size of the screen, then yeah, you do have stuff gets larger, right? However, this kind of wastes the capabilities of the screen because, well, you're not using the resolution that it's capable of. And also, not using the screen's native resolution may result in a fuzzier looking image because it has to do interpolative scaling. That said, modern monitors are actually getting much better at that, so it's not that distracting, but it's still, it's still not ideal. Also, if you're running inside a virtual machine, another option is to turn on its scaling option, assuming your hypervisor supports this. For example, VirtualBox, I'll show you here. So this is VirtualBox VM, and it actually has an option under virtual screen. You can like scale to 100%, 125%, whatever. One of my VMs, I actually have been doing that. So like I said, this particular screen is 2560 by 1600, but if I set the screen resolution of my VM to 1680 by 960, I think it is, and then scale to 150%, that actually comes out to almost exactly full HD size. But again, it is scaled, it's interpolated, it's not the native resolution, and it probably won't look as good. So, there we go. So anyway, neither of these workarounds is really ideal, but if they work for you, great. If you're happy with it, use it. That's fine. Like simplest solution that works for you is generally the best, right? But I think we really want a better solution. So what we want is some way to increase the size of various on-screen elements. So icons, GUI controls, GUI text, and text in windowed command prompts. So OS2 Windows, DOS Windows. Note that I didn't list full screen sessions there, because that actually isn't so much of a problem. On older systems, switching to full screen mode usually involves switching to a lower resolution anyway. And on UEFI systems, we actually have a way, like our video driver modifications can actually scale the text up already in full screen mode. So that's not really an issue. It's the other stuff that I've listed here that we're concerned about. Now, for desktop icons, we already have a solution, right? We just use a high-resolution icon enhancer, like dynamic icons. So I have here a VM. Now, to get the full effect, it would have been nice to have the whole, like this shown at native resolution, the 2560 by 1600, so you can see just how tiny all of the text and icons are. Unfortunately, the projector does not support that resolution, so I had to shrink it down. So you'll have to kind of take my word for it that this is absolutely minuscule at the resolution on my screen that's native. So if you're familiar with, and I'm not sure why the X center isn't showing. I think this is cutting it off, but
I think it's down.
Yeah.
Yeah, because of the resolution is down.
Yeah.
Do you want to put it? Maybe you can put it in window mode, the VirtualBox machine. Yeah, and you can scroll down.
Okay, yeah, there.
Center.
All right. I would have thought that this resolution would be, what am I running this on here? This is, 1600 by 1200. I should have chosen something even smaller. Yeah. 16 by 9 resolutions. What a pain. All right. So anyway, it's under the workplace shell. You've got. Go on. Sorry, you can see that I had this on a higher resolution and changed it. So the dynamic icons here, it changes to using ping format icons, which you can then scale freely. So that's nice. But doesn't really help us so much with text now, does it? So, going back to my presentation, and
it requires PNG icons, doesn't it?
yeah, dynamic icons that we call it on OS. So, for PM controls and text, turns out that IBM gave us some help here because it's not everybody knows about this feature. It's kind of hidden. But native presentation manager controls are actually rescaled automatically depending on the default system font. And the system default font is normally system proportional, either 10 or 12 point. And this is controlled by a system setting, but the OS2 desktop does not normally expose that setting. There are some old video drivers that exposed it, but there are also some third-party utilities on hubs that expose it, but for whatever reason, it's not part of the sort of standard visible settings in the desktop. So besides the system default font, there are several other types of text that are defined by Presentation Manager. I've listed them up here on the slide. Now, these can all be manipulated to some extent by changing various settings. Unfortunately, those settings are all scattered around in different places, and some of them aren't very obvious. So, as I said last year, wouldn't it be nice if there was an easy way to set everything in one place with a mouse click? Well, now there is. After last year, I got to talking with Rich Walsh, who works on X Workplace. And from these discussions, a new feature set has been added to X Workplace as of version 1.0.16. And it is either just released or just about to be released. It's been released, yeah, I thought so, yeah. So, I'm using this feature that I'll show you in a second that makes it unnecessary to mess around with all the individual settings that I mentioned on the previous slide. So I have, let me just close that. I have X Workplace 1.0.16. I really have to reduce this resolution. Scrolling up and down is not going to be very comfortable. So 1.0.16, it's the X Workplace version, there. And where does this setting live? Well, it lives in one of the most easy to access possible places, by design. The desktop properties, first tab. So this is set to the standard sort of default text size configuration, and text size is the name of the feature. So you have a bunch of options: small, medium, large, and extra large. And if you want to preview it, you hit the test button. So what small looks like, it's basically that. Same as standard, but with smaller dialogues. It gives you a little description there. By the way, the test view will remain active until you hit end test, so you can actually switch back and forth between these. So this is medium. This is large. This is extra large. And there's actually more than these 5 designed into X Workplace, but the 5 sizes or font size sets that it selects and offers here will depend on what your screen resolution is. So if I was running at a much higher resolution, like my screen's native resolution, large would be more like 18 point. I may, at the end of this, try to see if this projector can handle my native OS2 install on this, which would be running at full native resolution. That would take the kind of VM out of the variable, but I want to get through this first because this VM is where I set up all the demos. So I'm going to change the size to, well, just to make it really visible, I'll change it to extra large, and then hit change size. Okay, so reboot to update the size to extra large, or press undo to cancel the change. So it does require a reboot to take effect. And before I reboot, I'm actually going to reduce the screen resolution just a little bit more. By the way, another aspect of this feature is some video drivers, the VirtualBox Editions is not, I think, one of them, but Snap is, Panorama is. Some video drivers offer like a DPI tab here, where you can change the font DPI or the dialogue DPI. There's no longer any useful purpose in changing those around if you're using this text size feature. In fact, it's recommended that you don't, because if you change the DPI to something other than default, you will restrict the system to only being able to load the fonts that are designed for that DPI. So if you're using this text size feature, leave all of those video driver DPI and icon size settings at the default. Just a bit of caution there. All right, so I will reboot, and we will see what happens when we come up again. We should have a smaller screen with much larger text.
Alex, I noticed you're on VBox 6.1. Is that a conscious decision, or?
It's what I installed. It's not broken, so why update it? Right?
Fair enough.
Also, the early 7.0 versions, some people, I think myself included on another computer, did have some issues with it.
There were lots of issues.
Yeah.
They're all ironed out now, as far as I know.
Okay, that's good to know. Uh-oh, 12 more days. Okay, now we fit on the screen here. Okay. Okay, so the fonts are bigger.
Yeah.
Notice that the window list default font is also bigger. The icon size, the icon text size is bigger. The tabs are bigger. The fonts here are bigger. This is for you, Roderick.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, Dave Yo updated the Doodle screensaver message file so that it actually supports this now. Yeah. So yeah.
I was going to make you fail on
Sorry?
I was going to make you fail on that, but
Oh,
you're
yeah.
great. Yeah.
But maybe it's also important to emphasize that dialogue per dialogue and program by program has to be checked if this works.
Yes. Now, anything. Well, I'm gonna kind of talk on that in a little, but I'll jump ahead a little to it now, actually. So yes, there are a lot of programs which weren't really designed to be aware of this feature. Again, this is kind of based on an IBM design feature in OS2, but a lot of people either don't know about it or didn't really understand how it was meant to work, and some programmers design their dialogues in a way that kind of subverts it, and so it doesn't necessarily work that well with all third-party applications. Now, there are ways to deal with that to some extent. I'll go into more detail about that on the last couple slides. But anything that's using default font presentation parameters should automatically scale up. So this is the defined objects. There's what's another good one? PMSeek, is that one? Yeah, PMSeek, that scales up. Most of the built-in IBM stuff does. Rich actually put quite a lot of work into making sure that all of the desktop tabs, like notebook tabs and so on, get refreshed. There was a little bit of work that had to be done in X Workplace to make that happen. But the notebook pages themselves, they will scale up as long as they were properly designed to have the right sort of dialogue layout for the default font. And in ArcaOS, I did have to make a few tweaks to some of them. Well, quite a few of them actually, but that's in ArcaOS. Some of it was done for ArcaOS 5.1. More of it will be done for ArcaOS 5.1.1. And thanks to Rich's efforts, all of the X Workplace specific stuff has also been updated. As I said, Dave Yo updated the screensaver page, a bunch of other stuff that's been done. Some of them still need a bit of work, like some of the I think dynamic icons pages are a little bit cramped on some resolutions, but these are all things that can be addressed. So I also, by the way, as part of this, updated Styler. And this one was, what we basically did was we took some of the features that are in Styler to deal with title bar fonts and dialogues and stuff, and we harmonized it with the system settings. So there is no longer a specific setting in Styler to change the title bar font if there is a system setting for it. If there's no system setting for the title bar font, which honestly on a properly configured system should never happen, Styler will offer that option still, but generally speaking, you would now only change the title bar font. If not in the scheme, then with the text size feature. For dialogues, it now simply checks to see what the default window text font is and uses that as the override. So if you don't have this turned on, anything which doesn't have a, any dialogue that doesn't have a custom font will use whatever is the system default, I think. But if you override that, then you have your window text font will now be set as the dialogue font, and it'll be overriding the presentation managers on the dialogues, as Styler has always done, if that means anything to you. And if it doesn't mean anything to you, well, I can't help you. If you're not totally sure what I mean by some of these terms, so a lot of the individual settings that are affected by this are part of the scheme. So window text, for example, is one. Active title bar text, or active title text, and so on. So,
Is Styler something that it was an IBM thing, or you wrote that, or what?
It was a third-party system enhancer written by a clever guy from Italy named Alessandro Cantatore. And when he left he ceased OS2 development, he sort of bequeathed his source code. I've sort of become the de facto maintainer of it since then.
So that's allowing you to set all the sort of system-wide rendering parameters for objects.
Yeah, like the title bar color, like gradients, the enhanced push button gradients, stuff like that.
And what about dialog boxes in just an application? What happens with those? Do they work?
With which? The X Workplace enhancement?
With the stuff you're demonstrating. I'm not sure how to phrase it, but
yeah,
with the stuff you're demonstrating.
They should get updated perfectly well, unless they are doing some slightly unorthodox things, which some do. I'll get to that in a bit. Yes, Roderick?
Try Lucidity. Just that's probably one of the things that falls outside of the font setting, but you'll see what happens to the toolbar at the top. Here on my laptop, it's the magnifying glass has the size of a match hat, just about.
Yeah, I mean, some of these applications, you can see here, this dialog is clearly using a hard-coded 9.worksense font. But, these are not insurmountable problems if we can modify the program, or if we can even just modify the dialog resources. And again, I'll get to that on the last couple of slides. So what I think I'll do now is flip back to my slides and continue the show. What? No. Hold on. Presenting? There we go. Okay. All right, so what is not covered by this? Dynamic icon size. As you saw, I set that separately. For now, that is not integrated. It is planned to have that integrated, and I suspect that will happen very soon. And there may be more information about that a bit later, but not from me. Also, window fonts in the command prompt sessions, aka VIO window font size. So I'll show you that on the next slide. That can be set, but it has to be set separately at the moment. WinOS 2. WinOS 2 is still going to be tiny. There may be some things that can be done. There's been a bit of research done on it. Some more research is probably needed before we can answer that definitively. So yeah, if people are desperate for WinOS 2 to be scaled up, at the moment it's not happening, but I don't know how much that's in demand. Scroll bar width, spin button width, and combo box drop-down menu button width, those don't seem to scale up automatically. There is probably a way to do it, either by setting it programmatically or possibly system-wide by subclassing it somehow. I don't know. This is something that we might be able to do in Styler. I briefly looked at it at one point when I started researching this. I'm not super familiar with how Alessandro adds like stuff to the window hooks here. So I did try something. I managed to render my desktop unbootable, so I didn't explore it too deeply yet, but in theory there might be something that we can do about that. Also, as we've touched on already, third-party applications that have hard-coded fonts. And I'll have a little more to say about that in a bit. Windowed command prompts is the next thing to address. So it's not integrated into the X Workplace feature, but there is a font size dialog in the OS to Windows system menu where you can choose the font. You can change it for that session, or you can change it system-wide as the default. And this dialog offers you all available sizes of the system VIO font that are defined in dspres.dll. And as I discovered, the fonts have to be specifically in dspres.dll for them to be usable here. I tried installing them as a separate font file, but that did not work. So anyway, ArcaOS 5.1 adds a couple of new larger sizes of system VIO that are suitable for high-resolution screens. And so I will now show you that. Okay, here we have a VIO window. You go in there, you click on font size, and you've got your font size selections here. So I believe this was the largest one that IBM provided, 30 by 12. We have also provided 26 by 14, which is new, 32 by 16, which is new, and 36 by 20, which is new.
Nice.
Yeah. So there is that.
Your system never hangs when you're changing those fonts?
No comment. we have under some circumstances when we were sort of developing this encountered some systems under some situations which don't react well to changing.
That was a personal question. Has it happened to you?
It certainly happened to me when I was testing some stuff and doing kind of unorthodox things. I mostly scratched that down to testing stuff and doing unorthodox things. It was an issue in the ECS, ArcOS installer, that caused us to take a couple of the larger ones out for the dspres.dll that we put on the boot media. But I had not, until you brought it up, seen the problem on an installed system that wasn't heavily being messed around with. But I have kind of been keeping an eye on this. Last week, I think it was, I actually went back in and reduced the size of a lot of the additional, well, of the 3 additional fonts that we added, just to see if something in the, I mean, that largest font there, it's very large. It's getting very close to the limit of a single resource file, which is like 64K or something. So if I don't know, but hopefully that will help, having reduced the size of them. Basically, I just deleted a bunch of character sets that I don't think people are really likely to need in a single byte operating system VIO window, like Greek or half-width Korean, since anybody who's using a double-byte operating system will have special double-byte fonts for that anyway. And if they're using Presentation Manager, that's what Unicode's for. So anyway,
Okay.
I digress. And let me find my, there we go. All right, back to third-party applications. So this is kind of the big remaining piece. So many third-party applications use the system default font for dialogues and then a user configurable font for other text. For example, in a word processor, you might be able to configure, or in a text editor, you might be able to configure the font that's used on dialogues and menus, whereas the actual content, like the text editing area or the document font, might be user configurable separately. So generally speaking, that's fine. The text size feature should cover them perfectly well. But some programs use a fixed font for dialogues, and we saw that in Lucide just now. It's quite common for programs to use 9.warp sans or 8.health. So in this case, it may be, in fact in many cases is, possible to update them just by updating the dialogue resources, which is what we've done with many other programs in the past. It's a bit of a process, but it's quite doable, as long as the fonts are defined in the dialogue resources. This does not require access to the program source code. It probably requires permission from whoever owns the program, if there is still somebody who owns it, but well, that's something that can be addressed going forward. So, case by case. The bigger issue is programs which hard code fonts directly in the program code. In that case, the program code would need to be modified, and obviously that does require the source code. It remains to be seen how much this is a problem, how many applications this is a problem for, and how many of those can or cannot be dealt with. So this is probably the biggest piece remaining of stuff to do, at least from my point of view, on my particular task list. We'll see. At any rate, the feature is, right now, quite usable.
Can I ask a question here? As a third-party application developer, is there some kind of guide to say, how could I make something that cooperates as well as possible with the new font resizing? Okay, there we go.
I'll get to that one in a second, though. Other updates. Many programs and utilities that are used in ArcOS 5.1 have been updated to use this new dynamic font setting support. More will be updated in 5.1.0, such as NewView, such as the mini LVM, Installation Volume Manager, and the disk utility, ANPM, the AE editor. And also, most Qt-based apps will already use the dynamic font settings. They generally default to the system dialog font already, and unless the developer in question has, again, specifically overridden that font, which is probably not that common in Qt applications, because Qt dialogues generally don't have the problem of large, blocky-looking fonts by default. So it doesn't kind of irritate people who are developing them as much as basic presentation manager apps do. So yeah, that's where we are with system utilities. So back to your question, Neil, recommendations for application developers. This is very high level, very kind of loose guidelines. If you want sample code and stuff like that, talk to me later. But anyway, the general rule is for dialogues, just don't use font presentation parameters unless you have to. If you do have to, well, then you can kind of get clever. In a couple of my programs, that's going down a rabbit hole. Again, if you want sample code, talk to me. The other thing is for dialogues, when you're laying them out, lay them out so that they will fit and text doesn't get chopped off. if you have the default system font set, usually 10 or 12 system proportional. And if you're doing this, by the way, make sure you turn off that styler option to replace the fonts, because if you have that on, you won't be able to see what the default system font is. So, even if you do use font presentation parameters, you still have to lay out the text so that it would work with system proportional, as a general rule. Programmatically speaking, for window text, if you're setting it in code, you should get the value of that INI item, so PM system font window text. And that's a function call basically that you'd use in C, for example. And for other items like menus, title bars, etc., if you don't want to just accept the defaults, go to the scheme. Or rather, all of those fonts, the menu font, title bar font, etc., they are also defined as keys under the PM system font application in os2.ini. So you can get them from there. All right, so before we get to Q&A, I think there was something else I wanted to show you, wasn't there? Actually, no. What I wanted to show you was a couple of things that are probably going to require me to reboot. So first, questions.
So is this included by default in the OS build, or is it, I'm just saying, an add-on?
Kind of depends on how you define that. It is included by default in X Workplace and in the special ArcOS build going forward. It's only just been released, so it's not in ArcOS 5.1.0. It will be in the next release, though.
All right. Is it installable through ANPM?
If it's put in the repo, yes.
Yes, could you tell me?
I don't remember whether it's in the repo, but it is. If you
certainly
log
download
in, you can go to the subscription downloads, and they're listed there, all the languages.
Oh, and the other question I had was this: the situation in which you're concerned about this is when you have a relatively modest sized monitor with a very high resolution. That would be the worst case, right? Now, if you have a high resolution but a very large monitor, this stuff is probably not going to bother you so much.
It depends how picky you are about squinting and stuff or whatever. I mean, yeah, for a large monitor, high resolution is probably not going to be that much of an issue for you. Again, it's not really the size of the monitor by itself, and it's not the screen pixel dimensions by itself. It's the combination of the two. It's the pixel density. So a low pixel density is going to cause you to squint, unless you have exceptional eyesight, which I don't. Maybe you do, but yeah, that's the basic thing. So, Doug?
In your programming examples, will you show all of the keys in the profile that you need to go to get the size
yeah,
fonts
sure.
you're controlling?
Sure. Hang on. You know what? I am just gonna end out of that and keep trying to move the mouse off the wrong edge of the screen here. Registry Editor, this is one of those programs that unfortunately is using hard-coded fonts, and that's not going to be super easy to make dynamic. So this is os2.ini, or HINI user profile, as IBM likes to call it. And so under the PM system fonts, these are the ones, these all get updated together by that text size feature. It does a few other very clever things as well. This isn't the whole of it, but this is the most visible part. So yeah, these are the fonts that you would generally want. Default font is the system default font. That's not the same as the default as the window text font. This is kind of a fallback font. It's what controls how dialogues are scaled. And if you do direct GPI rendering onto a presentation space without setting font attributes, that's the font that you would see by default. It is also the font that you would see on a dialog without any presentation manager set, assuming that you're not overriding those using styler or some similar feature. The window text font is defined, well, previously it was defined as part of the scheme, and it's meant to be a sort of general font for Windows. I don't actually know what has typically used it before now, but we've kind of settled on this as the font that we recommend applications use. And it's the font that I believe Rich is using to set the notebook page font, text font.
Are those entries that you've created now with your new system?
No,
So
they've always been there.
They've always been there?
Yeah.
Okay.
Although, default font is often not present because if it's not present, it defaults to a specific value. But these others should generally all be present.
The Open Class Library seems to have its own font management mechanism. There's a class for going in and acquiring system defaults. I guess I can just check it against this and see if that's what the values are.
Yeah, I would imagine it gets them from here, yeah.
Okay, thanks.
There's a question on IRC.
Yeah,
Do Java applications use the dynamic font settings?
that's a good question, I'm not sure. From what I know of Java, generally default Java fonts are defined in one of the Java properties in the runtime, so I would suspect not. I don't know if the IBM runtime environment has clever logic in it to like scale up the fonts. It's possible that it does, but I wouldn't guarantee it.
And also, what about Open32 applications like SmartSuite?
I couldn't comment on those. I'm not familiar with how Open32 works. If it goes back to the default system fonts, it should work okay, but I'm not sure.
Okay. We should run SmartSuite and see what happens.
Yeah. Actually, I suspect the registry editor here is Open32 as well.
That is open.
That was
32.
inherited from Lotus. So.
Yeah,
Okay.
probably is. So I mean, it's using the
Yeah.
it's using the system settings for title bar and menu fonts. These I know it actually has code in it to set the fonts from its own INI file settings. No, not INI file settings, its own resources. So it probably doesn't use typical Open32 logic for that. I mean, I can change the fonts in the registry editor by changing the font strings in the resources, but there's no way to make it dynamic, unfortunately, for this particular application. I don't know about other Open32 applications.
No one asked any questions about IBM Works and whether those fonts change also. Just
So
checking.
let me ask a question about IBM Works.
We paid him for it.
All right, I am going to try rebooting to my ArcOS installation, which is running natively on here. Just want to...
Alex, there were a couple X-Center plugins where the fonts were not scaling. Are those? Has Rich done anything with those? Do you know?
He has done some things with at least some of them,
Okay.
but I don't recall off the top of my head.
I think Sentinel Memory Watcher was one that had wonky fonts in it.
Yeah, unfortunately I can't really test without having like a really large resolution
Yeah.
screen here. So,
Gotcha.
and as you know, I'm not much of an Xcenter user myself. Well, let's see if the projector is going to accept this, or if ArcOS is going to, if OS2 is going to accept
Rich is
the
on the
HTML.
chat, maybe he can reply.
Oh, okay.
And then the smoking out.
Didn't work.
Nah.
But sometimes with your machine, I booted up and like partway over the installation.
I got another machine upstairs we're trying out now.
Yeah. Or maybe,
He may.
no, but
Okay, maybe it's got to work.
but the stick is,
I'm going to make another machine now.
the thing that's so old about this laptop is it gets this right disk full, which makes no sense. I don't know why it gives that.
Yeah, it doesn't look like it's gonna switch over.
Maybe it's the device, the HDMI HDMI capture or
maybe it's
I
the
would
BIOS
guess. I would
setting?
guess most likely the BIOS just resets to the monitor and expects you to use the hotkeys to switch, which of course are very unlikely to work here. Let me see if I
Nope.
can try it. Yeah. So maybe we can zoom in on the screen like we were talking before. But so here I have the large font settings turned on. I don't know. Can we like move the camera up or something? Okay, I guess you can kind of see that. So on this one, you see the sizes are somewhat bigger. So this one is actually using 12 point for small, whereas on the other one it was using 12 point for large, I think. Medium is 14 point, large is 18 point, extra large is 22 point. So just to compare, it'll do the test, that's standard. Small. Medium, large, which is what I'm currently set to, and extra large.
I can read that.
Yeah. Large. All right. Actually, that's not too bad. So that's what we're using. I did not install the updated version of the screensaver properties, so that's what it would look like before the exchanges.
Okay, that's
Yeah.
One little question there. So this was fixed because the resource file used to have a fixed font there,
Yeah.
and
As far as I
and they
understand,
changed
yes.
it. Okay.
Yeah. So, yeah, some of these. Oh, here's another thing that I had neglected to mention, and that is there's a new setting in the X Center. So, normally the X Center uses mini icons. There's now an option in the X Center properties to use large, or rather full-size icons. So these are actually full-size 40 by 40 icons. So that gives you a sense of how high my screen pixel density is. Yeah. But on this screen, the 40 by 40 icons are actually about the same size as the mini icons would be on a more traditional machine.
Very nice.
Yeah, and open a command prompt.
Did you know?
No, I didn't know.
So here I'm setting the font size to, oops. Hey Dave, guess what? It hung.
All right, my man. I'm sorry, I don't mean to.
This is a conspiracy.
Yeah, as I said, this is running a fairly old, months old version of it. So as I said,
This is called Schadenfreude, I believe.
yes.
I mean, I'm really sorry to see.
Oh yeah, you can see how tiny the AN launcher is.
You jinxed it.
That's the AN launcher menu.
I touched this machine.
You did.
I mean, deadly.
Have you been causing all of these magic lockups on all the machines at the boot screen? You're also
You're gonna have to take fingerprints.
Yeah.
Anything in particular that somebody wants to look at? I'm sure you have some ideas, Roger.
Sorry?
Anything in particular that you want me to look at with this feature turned on? Anybody? Yes.
I'll try the prompt again and hoping that it doesn't blow up again. Because it is pretty useful very useful. Instead of staring at a small VO window, you can now crank up the font size and then you get a bigger font.
Yeah.
A bigger
Oh,
LCD.
one thing I can show you here is why that brightness is. Yeah. Well,
It looks like it's on an altar.
Yeah. So, new view has been updated to use the dynamic fonts for its dialogues and controls. The content window, you really can't see that.
Yeah.
Hang on.
Yeah. I guess.
Okay. So the content window is not sized dynamically because this is actually a user configurable font. So in cases where you have a user configurable font, you're going to want to go in and change that in the settings. I'm not sure why that's cutting off that, and I thought I'd fix that, or I might have an older build on here. So yeah, so it's like 18 or something. Yeah, so that's new view now. As I said, I updated ANPM, I updated the AE editor as well, so that look at the status bar text is now using the 18-point font. The product information is, I had not seen that before.
Just need to add a scroll bar there.
Yeah. Even the font dialog. Those are like Korean fonts, if you're wondering. So yeah.
What about Lucy? Did you pop that up?
Lucy.
PDF.
I
Yes,
think
on this
we
resolution
were
you can see the
basically just
slider. There is a problem, right?
saying that it's
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
gonna have to be
The
on
slider's still
Yeah, but on this kind
not
of
scaled, yeah.
resolution.
You had also updated NAPs, right?
Yes, I believe so.
What?
NAPs of the replacement for MPTS.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I see what you mean there, Roderick. The toolbar is a little small.
Yeah.
Microscopic.
Yeah. So this is a case. Yeah. So this is a case where the application is going to need to be updated.
But can you, in this case, update the resources, or do you need to recompile the program?
I don't know. It would have to be investigated.
You can extract and modify and reinsert the resources on executable.
Oh yeah, but that only works if the font's being set in resources.
Right, I understand.
Yeah. Let me see. ANPM. Yeah. I don't have Wi-Fi on here.
Huh.
Yeah, we got controls here have been updated, including the font and the status bar text and the dialog text as well. Has been updated. The installation volume manager. By the way, to answer an earlier question, another way to open the installation volume manager is to right click on the drives folder and click manage volumes. Yeah, there we go. So this is actually the minimum of the 3 sizes that the installation volume manager can cycle through. Now, you can't always increase something effectively if there isn't a larger size installed on the system, but it tries to determine what is available and then set it. So, if I were to turn off all of these settings and keep this resolution exactly the same, in fact, I think I'll do that, and I'll show you what it would look like if I didn't have this feature running. Did I just step on the HDMI cable again? Yes. Alright. So I'm going to go into desktop properties. It's really hard to control the mouse when you're looking at a projector, I must say. Okay, so I'm going to go to standard. Test. So that's basically the IBM standard defaults. So apply that, and just to be comprehensive, I will also turn off the dynamic icons so you can see how big or how small the icons truly are. And I'll reboot. That wallpaper, by the way, is a photo that I took in Kyoto, Japan.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Yeah, I'm quite pleased with it. I'll need the Zagacia standing at the top to complete the... Oh, and cherry blossom to complete like the stereotypical.
A reboot is required because the variables are on that register.
Yeah, I mean the system, like the system dialog settings have been changed. Presentation manager's scaling options have changed, so it has to reboot to...
If you only reboot with the workplace shell, does it work?
No.
Does it don't? No?
No,
Okay.
this is not a workplace shell setting, it's a
Ah,
presentation
okay,
manager
okay.
setting.
Okay.
All right, so yeah, you can see. Oh, I should change the X center icons back to mini icons. Okay, so here we have what basically the system would look like on this resolution if we did not have this new feature. I will go into Mini LVM again and show you what the default sizes would look like.
Yeah.
This, actually, it's okay. So that's basically the default size of stuff.
What resolution is the screen?
2560 by 1600,
Oh, okay.
and it is a 16-inch screen. And but new view. Yeah, so the new view controls are much smaller. Obviously, I changed the content font, which is a saved setting, so that's still big. But now you can see all of this is so much smaller. Even the status bar is smaller. All of this. So this is what you would be looking at without this new text size feature and without dynamic icons turned on. So that's hopefully illustrative of why I think this project was valuable and why we've put a lot of work into making it as elegant as it is. And I really have to put a shout out to Rich for doing the difficult work in implementing the X Workplace side of things. Are there any more questions before I wrap it up? I think we're a bit over time, but nobody's actually waiting on us, are we?
Your last presentation today.
What is prize? Roderick?
One nerdy question. You and I have been looking into this purely out of curiosity. It's always fun to bring a OS to the next level of insanity, and what I mean with that, we already looked at Windows 3.1, and you could crank up the icon size. There's a setting in WinINI or SystemINI.
Yep.
I've done some quick googling around to see if people could figure out a way to make the icons in the folders bigger, but based upon what I could find, there was nothing that you could really do with it. It's just a raw limitation of the Windows 3.1 graphical engine. Or have you been able to find any forms of hope that could be modified other than the font setting?
I have not done any further research on it, so what you know is what I know.
Okay, no.
Yeah, I think if it's using GDI, you're kind of stuck with that vulnerability.
There is a simple setting that you can specify the size of the font, so that
Right.
and then you get on the screen like this, you get large fonts under the titles, like the program folder, but then you get these ridiculous small icons. So it's completely.
They're not vector icons either, so.
No.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Ooh, that's where you can microscope.
Now maybe you can get the dialogues better if you install Microsoft Ball.
Yeah, right. In my wildest dreams, maybe.
Sorry?
In my wildest dreams, maybe. Yeah, Microsoft Bob is not.
I think it works on Windows too.
Oh, it will. It's a 16-bit app, so.
Yeah, I'll wait. No, sorry. I don't know. No, I don't have. No, I don't have the battery.
You think that was the problem?
That's what we call a headache.
Okay.
Well, I guess it did, but there's.
I brought my reading glasses up to the front with me just in case.
Oh, and I didn't want to go into the airplane with it. Alex, thank you.
Yeah.
You're welcome.